Ladies and gentlemen, creative community out there, it's such a blast that you guys are back and joining the latest episode of Talks on Acting. This time with my man, Adam J Stephenson, right? Out of New Orleans, and then moving all over the country of the beautiful United States to learn the craft. And the way he developed his craftsmanship, the way he developed his craft and how he's using it on all those different various platforms and how he empowers people and what he can share with us, that I found the most interesting. And as you know, we always, we're kind of diving into those various pockets of creativity all over the place. And we love taking this content, sharing it with our community so you can really level up your performance. So thank you so much for taking your time, Adam, and welcome to the Coach MC studio.
I'm excited to be here. You reached out to me on Instagram. And so of course, there's no telling who's out on there. So, but I immediately started delving into your content and stuff and seeing other people that you talk to, and the way that you guys are approaching these conversations. I'm excited about it today because it's very nice in the state that we're in right now to feel collaborative, even across oceans, across states, even across a street, if we can right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Even with our neighbors. Are you still there, by the way?
Yeah.
It's kind of funny. And like I said, I mean, it highly intensified throughout this quarantine. And I think that's the beautiful part of always dealing with these, upsetting and kind of strange situations in our life, to do really, the best out of it, to kind of use that momentum no matter what it is. And we're facing something pretty much unprecedented, right? We have to go back back into history to kind of find something that is similar to what we're dealing with right now. And it's beautiful you're joining this talk, because I think that's, one of the things that we can do, like, give the people some tools, some leverage to kind of get out of this state as soon as possible and really, create something for themselves, learn to deepen their craft, and actors, performers, creative people out there. I mean, there are so many movies on hold, pilots being on hold. There's so many, auditions that are still, there, like kind of broke down in the process, and we are all waiting to get back to work. But in the meantime, I mean, of course, you can take your time off. You can, sit on your couch and be lazy for a little bit. That's also, by all means necessary. But then again, you have to kind of gather your tools and get out there and make a difference.
You're allowed that for a moment, but we're approaching like 3 months. If you're still just taking time, like now you might need to analyze some of your habits of like, it was great at the beginning, when you thought it was like a 3 or 4 week thing. Okay, I'm going to take some time to myself. I don't have to write the next great novel. I can just, try to find some peace right now. Now we're 3 months in. You might as well write that novel or something, because like now time is just going along.
Right, there is no Nobel Prize coming through this quarantine, so now it's time to get back on track. I totally agree. I mean, isn't it funny though? Isn't it funny how fast, and it's frightening to a certain extent also, how fast we can adapt, how fast we can switch and say, okay, this is the situation now. What can I do right now? It's like, and how quick we can also get back. So how many layers of reality are inside of us? How many layers of reality are actually present in the environment? And
there'll be an immense, probably psychological study of this time after years and years after the fact, because how you and I are perceiving and dealing with this is going to be vastly different than people that are hit harder because of their unemployment level, or because they already had a pre-existing mental health issue or physical issue or substance abuse. There's going to be so many things that are exacerbated by this moment that it'll take us forever to like sift through the rubble of it in good and bad ways. There will be great leaps in understanding that come from it, and then some areas where we go backwards, and it'll be very interesting. But I think I was reading this book, biography from Billy Crystal, and he talks a lot about in his life those good moments when he's like about to go out on stage and host the Oscars, the birth of his children, these moments where he goes, okay, take a breath, don't worry about what I'm going to say or what I'm going to do, let me just absorb this moment. And as crazy as this moment is, I hope that creatives and people that are artists that want to expand on their craft and their knowledge are taking breaths and moments to go, let's really Like, not worry about when the auditions are going to come, not worry about the opportunities that were lost, but like this right here and right now. How am I dealing with this? How is it happening? 3 years from now, when they make a movie about this and I'm auditioning for it, how am I going to process that again and be like, okay, what did I actually do during that time? What did I actually feel like during that time? And, you know, really absorb what the moment is.
Are you journaling a lot? Are you kind of writing down this process, taking some notes? How are you processing? Because like you said in the beginning, okay, but now it's like 3 months. So, or like here in Europe, what is it like in Germany? It's been like 3 months so far. Yeah, 3 months of complete lockdown. So how do you stay updated with your inner thoughts?
I do a little bit of journaling. I do a lot of like a short form note taking that is more for like, okay, if I was going to write this into a screenplay or script or something, like I'll just throw out these little notes and words that'll trigger my memory. I also have, I'm not great about being diligent about journaling. So I really only journal in like extreme moments, which would have been like at the very beginning of this. But now that we're 2-3 months in, I kind of don't care as much, even though I should.
Yeah.
So I also have this app. It's called, it's like 1SE. It's like 1 second a day. What it is just every day I'm finding a moment and you just record like 1 second of it.
That's interesting.
And then it'll create these little collages for like a month, a year or whatever of like, here's all the things that you saw or did or whatever. And
it's like one snap diaries. It's a snap.
Yeah, it just creates like a little digital diary. And I've gone back and I've rewatched some of that, and I've rewatched just the section about quarantine, and I've rewatched like before quarantine and kind of you know, going back and forth between those two moments.
What has been the most positive and the most frightening aspect of this quarantine so far for yourself?
On a personal level, for me, it was great to take a moment and not have to worry about my job, not have to worry about the audition and the book and the next thing, and being in that kind of self-promotional grind. Because for me, one of the things that I've had to struggle with over the last couple of years, the more success that I have, the more imposter syndrome I have. And so it's the more that I go, it's a fluke, and eventually they're going to find out that I'm not that good. They're going to fire me. You know, as soon as this comes out and I get cut from it, people are going to talk about how I got cut, and then I'll never work again. So, you know, when I had a period a couple of years ago where I was working for like 4 or 5 months. I was working on and off, but steadily. And I was like, boom, this is what it feels like. And then when that went away, and then it was, you know, the slowdown that always happens in the summer, and there's a slowdown that always happens at the end of the year, holidays and stuff. And like the moment that I wrap a job, if I don't have another acting gig lined up, I immediately get depressed. And I immediately start dealing with all those things.
Right. You're caught up in that trough. It's like, oh.
You're like, well, that was it. I had it. I guess I'll go, you know, sling coffee at Starbucks because I'm dead.
Isn't it beautiful? Yeah. And coming back to the other thing that you kind of
so what's great about this is being able to take a break and know that I'm not missing moments. I'm not missing opportunities because they don't exist. So to actually have a moment where I was 100% like, oh, I do not have to worry about the next job. And I don't have it's not there, and it's outside of my control. I can't be angry about it. It just is what it is. It's an act of God, you know.
It is in a certain way. It's this invisible bacterium that kind of stopped all activity. And like you said, you don't have to, you know, there is no bad conscience involved. If you're just sitting there, if you're just looking outside, if you're just realizing, come down a little bit to yourself, because right now everything is on hold. So it's like reality, it's being on hold, existence is on hold, all that dynamic, that usual critical mass that you kind of canalize and channel every day. Now you kind of have it for yourself. And that's scary and that's beautiful at the same time. And I think, like you said, it's been this oscillation in history, and we will talk about that. And how funny will it be in a couple of years to audition for the pilot that's been surely shot, and also the series, and to be in there, because you kind of, you know, everybody has a kind of personal relation to that. And I think every show that will come out of it, probably not every show, but a lot of shows will have huge success because everybody can relate to it in a certain sense. So it's
it'll have to time itself correctly, because you can't,
Yeah.
it can't come out in 2021,
Right.
because we won't
It
be
has to
ready
be
for
the
it. We'll be
right
like, no, no,
time.
no, I was through
I
that.
agree.
But
Yeah.
so I had this conversation, and I find it interesting of like, I don't have kids. Do you have kids? You
No,
do?
not so far.
Oh,
No.
you do? Okay.
You have two
But
dogs, right?
I do have dogs.
Hmm.
But I have a niece and a nephew that are, they're young. My niece just turned 10.
Hmm.
Um, and I think about now in my 30s when I watch movies about moments in time, like I watched the TV show about the O.J. Simpson
Hmm.
trial, which happened when I was probably 9 or 10,
Hmm.
and watching things about some of the big incidents in America in the late 90s,
Sure.
late 80s, early 90s, where I was too young to really understand what it was that was going
Right.
on. And now I'm watching it, on TV, and done it in a
It's
way
second
where I'm like,
understand.
oh, now I understand what that's referential about.
Hmm.
Kids now, there's that certain level where they're just like, I don't know, for some reason, when like second grade, I never finished second grade. It just kind of stopped mid-year. When they're like 20 or
You,
30, they're gonna be
you
like, I don't,
remember that?
yeah, there
You
was
just
a
stopped right in the
disease.
middle, right?
And you're probably like, yeah, it was kind of a thing, but like not that many people died. But then
Hmm.
you'll look at like worldwide, so it
Hmm.
was bigger number than you think. And
Hmm.
so it'll be interesting in a decade, 2 decades, when someone makes a movie or a TV series specifically about this moment, the people that weren't truly aware of what was going on will be
Yeah.
able to sit back and go, oh,
Oh,
that
yeah.
that was a big deal, and there was economic turmoil, and there was political turmoil in
So
countries
many
because of it, and there's
ramifications on so many levels.
yeah,
Yeah,
things that you maybe aren't aware of if it doesn't directly affect you in the moment.
what I like about your style, this is also one of the reasons I reached out to you on Instagram, because you're so opposite of how I do it, and not in terms of um, I think what's internally going on, but how it manifests on the surface, right? In terms of your mimic, of your facial expression, and how you connect to your partner in the scene. And I always look for content that kind of helps me also to understand and reflect on my craft and what I could potentially improve. And I think this is what the way you're approaching scenes and acting. This is something truly useful that we can share with our communities, because if you look at my stuff, I'm always a bit
Mhm.
out of myself. I'm always kind of making it big, always risking, and
Yeah.
you have that very passionate concentration. You're very focused. So we have these yin and yang yin and yang principles, and both could work. Both
Yeah.
make
Yeah.
sense. Both have an
They have their
impact on the
moments.
scene.
Yeah.
Both have their very true moments, and both are, we are both looking for that truth, for that genuine behavior, for that real reaction, but they just manifest in such a different way. Was it part of Sanford Meisner? Of course, I mean, it's always part of our education of growing up in different cities also, but how did you kind of how did you find that term of expression that works for yourself?
It started, so when I moved to Chicago, and that's where I kind of started as an actor. I fell into it there, and I studied at the Second City Conservatory. So I started with improv, and which is very, very, very similar to a Meisner approach of being,
Mm-hmm.
you're there and you're just listening, and your
Mm-hmm.
responses are coming off of what you're getting from your scene partners. So
Mm-hmm.
improv really started, was a great way for me to start, because it wouldn't allow me to get in my head. It's all about listening to you and responding. I can't write my responses. I can't, be ahead
Right,
of where the
right,
train is going.
right.
But what I learned also from Second City, which is so comedy centric, is that in the world of comedy, I am the straight man in the scene. I am not the large, flaky character. I'm not
Mm-hmm.
the one that's going to have a weird voice. I'm not the
Mm-hmm.
one that's doing a weird
Mm-hmm.
physicality. And the analogy that I like to use that is, in comedy, I'm Jason Bateman. So if you watch Arrested Development,
Right.
he is the normal, natural, level-headed person,
Absolutely.
and his reactions to the wildness of the rest of his family is
Right.
what makes it funny.
Right.
And that's sort of
Very good
my
analogy. Beautiful. Mm-hmm.
that's sort of my like route and where I am at
Mm-hmm.
it. and it was never a conscious decision. It was just, you do it, you get up and you do it, and you do it, and you do it. And then you start to realize your habits and your patterns and going, okay, this is where I feel comfortable, confident, and centered in my performances. And it's not to say I can't expand outside of that, but if this is my core,
right,
then I'm always just degrees left and right of my core. And I think good acting always comes from a certain core of the individual. In that, an example that I give to students sometimes is, you see a script and it'll say that a character gets angry and it'll have exclamation points. If you think of like the, Richter scale of anger, I was like, but think about how you actually really react to being angry. If you pissed me off to the 10th degree, I don't yell. I'm that guy that gets quiet and close and talks through my teeth. And I'm a small guy, and I get physically like right there, because I'm like, oh, if we're doing this, like,
then
I might lose a fight, but I'm gonna make you bleed.
Right. I make you bleed. I make you work it. I make you work.
So I think that stillness just comes from how I process what's around me. And, it's how I would process the crazy characters that I'm getting in improv. And it's how I process, in a dramatic scene, I want to just be listening, and I don't want my emotional reactions to overpower my ability to listen to what's coming at me.
That's beautiful. And I think that's super interesting, because people, well, I mean, it's normal in these times, but we're so focused on how we look and how people perceive us. We're so much about the opinions of others, so that our play, of course, being something so intimate and about ourselves, and being something so private, of course it gets affected by what we perceive in our environment. So sometimes when we act, we kind of have that tendency to be liked. We want to be liked. We want to be perceived. We want to be acknowledged. We want that instant gratification.
We want the pat on the back and the gold star.
So sometimes I guess we're getting a little bit too far out there, and that's where we start to have that insecurity. And then all of a sudden, our body moves in a way it shouldn't move in a scene, or where it's actually not necessary, or where it's not required. And one of my all-time greats, I mean, I studied his book, I don't know how many times I've read, Acting in Film by Michael Caine. And he's that perfect,
beautiful.
I love that book. It kind of taught me how to live, basically. And he's that lighthouse of stillness and still transmitting. It is possible to be right there. Just Cary Grant said something very similar. Sometimes you just have to stand and to listen. Right. Just fill up that moment with yourself. Right. Don't think about that gratification, about that something smart that you look how you look. Make sure that you trust the people all around you, because they will place and set you in a perfect condition where you can transmit all that you have inside. So trust that stillness. Right. And I'm also speaking to myself, because sometimes I could use that. I could use it more, but I'm working on it.
But it's not, I don't think it's about chasing stillness, because
no, of course, that would just lead to staticness. Absolutely. Yeah.
If your movements in everything are supported by the work, if it's supported by the idea of the script or what's happening in the scene, it works perfectly. And in that, if you look at the TV show Always Sunny in Philadelphia, those are 4 or 5 just manic characters. They are moving all the time. They're doing stuff. They're always yelling at each other and throwing things. And there's a lot of talking with ants, and it's all this stuff. But they're still very fully realized characters reacting to each other.
It makes sense.
There's no stillness on that show whatsoever.
Right.
They're manic.
Absolutely. Otherwise, it gets, again, like an artificial instrument that gets superimposed, and it's something rationalized and not really felt. Absolutely.
It becomes a choice to be still rather than I'm still because of what's happening to me. And that never reads right. And that always leads to, when you make artificial physical choices, your body tenses up, your shoulders tense up, then it tenses here, then it affects your voice, and then like everything gets affected. You can't just tighten a muscle, like it all tightens when it's a nervous reaction to something. And so I think that stillness can come from a certain level of confidence in the material, but the movement can also come from a certain confidence in the material. And the inverses of both of those is if you don't know who you are, where you are, why you're saying what you're saying, or what you think about it, that could make you very blinky and twitchy, or it could make you so still that you seem robotic and weird.
Mhm. Like I
So
said
I
in the
mean,
beginning, the
yeah,
purpose is always the same, to deliver great entertainment. And how it
the truth,
manifests, of
find the
course, we're
truth.
right. It's the truth that moves us. And we're all different. 8 billion people, we're all different. We all react in a slightly different way to
Yeah.
information that might be the same. So everybody has to find its own key. But yeah, that's why we do this show. I love to dive into this diverse techniques and different approaches and different forms of seeing and interpreting art, because that's the beauty of our craft is, and coming back also to, you know, getting globally through this quarantine and
Yeah.
talking and exchanging with each other, because finally we got the time, we got the muse. Because let's face
Yeah.
it, sometimes it's not about that I don't want to, it's just like, oh, today I can't really contribute. But no, with this quarantine, a fair amount of time has been, you know, given to us that we kind of now have the chance to administrate for ourselves a little bit more. So we get more specific about our craft. We get more, you know, a little bit more detailed and about more precise. And
Yeah.
we have so much more potential that is, I call it shadow potential inside of ourselves, that is just hidden in that pocket of being specific, of being really precise on how you pronounce. And like you said, you have different layers of anger. You have
Yeah.
10 different levels. Why you jump in with level number 10? What comes afterwards? Right?
Yeah.
You can't
Yeah.
really, then you have to reduce and put it back, and then it becomes then it's a musical. It's not acting anymore. So, you know, try to think about your intensity levels. You know,
Yeah.
teach yourself to learn, at what intensity level am I right now? Is this my 5? Is this my 4? Am I at my 6 right now? Okay, now I see where I still have some air. I still can reach out to that. And then maybe a movement makes sense here. Maybe stillness makes more sense in this part of the segment. Just take it from line to line. Maybe you can combine both styles. I mean, there is no necessity of going, you know, monoethical on anything that involves creativity. Don't you agree?
Yeah.
Like, art is beautiful because we can, you know, steal from the masters. And
Well,
whoever
it always interests me when it comes back to, there's a reason you do it. So if you see a script where, you know, there's an exchange between two people and it's getting a little heated, and then one of them decides to get a cup of coffee while having the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Like, the simple thing of that is, I'm going to have this conversation, I'm going to go make a pot of coffee. But if you really delve into why would someone do that, if you're having a heated exchange with someone, why all of a sudden would your brain go, you know what, I need
You know,
caffeine? No.
yeah,
You start going, so
mm-hmm.
why am I doing it? What is the truth to that?
Mm-hmm.
It's an avoidance technique.
Mm-hmm.
It's because I'm tired of looking at you in the face, because if I
Mm-hmm.
keep looking at you during this conversation, it's going to piss me off further, and I'm going to say something I shouldn't. At least if I'm over here doing something, I'm releasing some of that energy. And so maybe I'm making this cup of coffee so that I can listen to you,
Or maybe I
without
can come up
killing
with a
you.
better argument.
Yeah,
Even
it
in
gives me
debate, or gives me some
the time to process,
mm-hmm.
and the time, you
Sure.
know, so you can't ever just like throw away something that might be a directive in there.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean a directive like, here the actor
No,
yells,
sure.
but if there's an action, and I believe that the writer is good at what they're doing, then I have to go, why is that action there? What is the purpose of that action? Because if it's just there to put movement in the scene, then yeah, it's useless, throw it away. But if there's a reason that I can come up truthfully of like why I'm doing that activity, then it brings everything to life.
Plus, I always feel like we are fast at, no, this doesn't make sense. I do it this way. No, I don't want to get there. This just costs me too much money. Why don't you, you know, dive into that? See where it does, you know, where it brings you. Like, have that open-mindedness that everything that is written in the script, you know, sometimes, like you said, sometimes, you know, maybe the script is not the best, but it's still my scripture. It's still my guiding light. So let's try to make out of this the best performance out of me, and include this and how to, of course, fulfill the author's text, but spicing it up with something truthful that really delivers entertainment to the people. And most of the times we're too fast and kind of checking that out and say, no, I do it my way. Lean into that, and maybe you will learn, oh great, now I found a reason in a scene to drink a cup of tea. Oh, this is great, I can use this for my further performances.
Yeah, no, and I love that. And I love the idea too that it's such a collaborative thing, in that So I'll bring it around to an example. I was working on the show, and we sat down, and it was a like lunch scene. And on the page, it made sense. We're all eating lunch, blah, 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 blah. But then when we actually got into the content of it and we started like sitting down and talking about it with the director and everything, we're like, well, but wait, we're not friends. Like we work in the same place, but we're having a heated conversation, and they only brought me here to basically give me a directive.
Mm-hmm.
So why would we have an entire meal and then get into this moment? Like it makes sense for us to meet outside of the office. It does not make sense for us to enjoy a meal together and then get into a heated debate. So we're like, okay, great. So we're here. We scrapped all of the food, and then like props brought us out just like a drink, and we were all just sitting there with drinks because it was like, yeah, you guys set up this meeting. You went over there. We got the drinks. We sat down and basically went, all right, what the hell do you want to talk about? And then we get right into the meat of it. There is no like sitting down and talking to a waiter and be like, I'll take the roast beef.
Let me see.
Yeah. There's no time that made sense for this casual interaction. And on the page, it made a little bit of sense. But when we sat there and we actually started running the scene, we're like, why do we have food in front of us? This doesn't make sense now. Because now it suggests that we've been sitting here for 20, 30 minutes. What would we be doing for that 30 minutes? So the collaboration and being able to like sit down with other artists and go like, well, I'm approaching it here, and here's what I think. Does that matter? Oh, that contradicts what you think, but does that work for the scene for us to contradict, or do we need to find a middle ground somewhere? And like, that's what's fun about this to me, is that there is no singular approach to it.
Absolutely. The collaborative side of it makes it complete, because our view is only as narrow as it can be out of our dimension, out of our perspective. And we can't really judge the other views because we don't know their backstories totally. Every human being has its own process, evolution, and the way he looks at things, it comes from so many different stratifications. So I have to respect how he is perceiving reality and how he's looking at things. I mean, I can't superimpose and that's the beauty about art. And what I do is the silly question take round with my clients. Sometimes I allow them to ask silly questions, because art should also be like entertainment, should also, about asking silly questions. Why is it like this? Kids always ask beautiful questions. They seem silly to us, but they make us reflect on a very deep level why things are the way they are, and questioning the status quo, by asking silly questions, or asking what if, right? What if we change this whole setup? What if we change the status quo? What if I go into that audition room and just scrap everything I prepared previously and I just do it completely the opposite way? What if, right? And don't close your art too much. Always leave that door open to that collaboration, to let other what ifs into your system, because they can only enrich in your picture. They can only make it more silly and deeper and more entertaining and fun for the audience.
Well, and I think that, the ability to get to a place in your craft where you are asking yourself those questions and asking like, can I flip it? Can I do this? And you're looking for the 3, 4, 5 approaches to a scene or to a moment, it allows you to really craft something and figuring out what feels most centered and grounded to you. Whereas early actors, bad actors, or green actors, when you're still figuring it out, what's the first thing they do when they get a script? They read it looking to see what they're saying. Or they read it and they start memorizing their lines, but they read it in a way that gives them so many initial reactions to what's happening that you get this tunnel vision. Where your brain immediately came up with this image or this idea of how the scene is supposed to go. And then they can't break out of that. And they're not willing to like look at it line by line and piece by piece and going like, okay, well, it says that I'm angry here, but is angry the most interesting thing? Yeah. Well, the script told me this. So
they invest so much energy. Wow. I always look at them and I'm amazed. We could have used that energy that you spend in the last 10 minutes to kind of look into another path, just really quickly explore if that works or not, and then just go back to the drawing board. Instead, you are you're making a case out of what? Out of your ego that is too comfortable and kind of tapping into a chamber that is dark right now, but that you could just light it up, just see where it takes you. Just have fun with it.
I think part of my background in improv gave me a little bit of that flexibility early on to go, okay, this is what's happening, but I can react to it 100 different ways, and I can respond to it 100 different ways.
How you started, how you kind of decided, what was your key moment, and what your education looked like a little bit, your training.
I refer to myself a lot as an accidental actor because I had no exposure to it. I mean, I moved around a lot as a kid. My dad worked in the oil industry, so I grew up mostly in suburbs of Houston, suburbs of New Orleans.
Mm-hmm.
And the high schools and middle schools and stuff that I went to, they had theater programs, but it was all like musical theater, and like I can't sing for crap. I can dance, but I don't want to be told how to dance. Like I just want to do it.
That's an interesting take. Okay.
Yeah, so like I just like I didn't want to be in that people group, and
Right.
and I didn't like high school thespians. So I was like,
Mm-hmm.
no
Mm-hmm.
thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Went to college, and I got involved in ministry in college, and
Mm-hmm.
started actually down a path to be a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And that was my first real exposure to the idea of sharing truth.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in the religious sense, but I would get up and I would be sharing ideas that I'd gotten through study and Bible study and bringing up these
Mm-hmm.
scriptures, but it was never about the Bible so much as how it impacts me. So I would share very, very personal stories. I would share about my shortcomings. I would share about my failures as a man, as a Christian, as whatever. And like I'm not ashamed to say I cried on stage many times trying to tell people about this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that feeling that I got in that collective space of we're all there for a specific purpose, and it can create this emotional kind of ripple through all of us.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
There's a level of performance there.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And so that was really my first exposure to what it is to be in front of people and just being as brutally honest as possible.
So we are extrapolating stories from the Bibles, creating your own metaphors with your connecting them with your own metaphors from your own life to share an experience to kind of uplift the community. That's
the responses to that feedback that you get from doing that, it's not any different. Like even if you're a pastor preaching, it's not any different than being a stand-up comedian and hearing the laughs and knowing you're going the right way.
The master of the ceremony. So
singing and hearing the applause. Like there's that feedback you get from people of like, this is working and it's making sense, or I'm off base and they don't understand, and I need to reroute how I'm explaining it. So you have this moment. But after that, my wife got into a grad school program and we moved up to Chicago. And my degree from college was in secondary education, and I was trying to get a job as an English teacher. Couldn't get one to save my life because of the like catch-22 of you have no experience, so we're not going to hire you. But if you don't hire me, I won't get experience.
That's a wonderful circular argument, isn't it? Yeah.
So I started doing a bunch of just random jobs to make ends meet, and I started working as an extra. I found postings where they just needed people to be in the background of scenes, and I was like, that sounds weird and fun. And I started going and being on set and just watching and absorbing everything and talking to other extras who were kind of fell into two groups of people. They were either pursuing acting and just had nothing else to do that day, or wanted the experience. So they were in school, or they were trained or training and had representation and all that. Or there were just more people like me that just didn't have a regular job and maybe couldn't hold down a regular job and maybe were a little insane. And so like I gravitated towards the actors. Started talking to them, and it just kind of went from there. And by the end of that year, like I'd worked more on set than I had as a substitute teacher. And I was like, I'm enjoying this, even if I'm just watching, Johnny Depp do a scene because I'm like one of 1,000 people there for like this weird, prison thing. And like, watching people do that, I'm watching these masters and they're doing it perfectly well. And I'm thinking like a weirdo, like, that looks easy. I think I can do that.
Yeah, I can do that. Yeah, sure.
So I started taking classes and pursuing the industry.
In Chicago? You started in Chicago?
Chicago. So Chicago, I did some workshops, and then that led to Second City Conservatory, and I auditioned and got in there, and it just kind of kept building and building and building. And, here I am almost 12 years in. And
and you start and you are a reoccurring regular on great shows, on Resident,
yeah,
Purge, Mr. Mercedes. You're doing great work. I mean, you're working with one of those people that I admire incredibly. It's Brandon Gleeson on Mr. Mercedes. Mr. Mercedes. I mean, this guy,
he is the epitome of most grounded and fantastic actor.
He's incredible. I mean,
that was of the work I've gotten to do, and what was great about that show is that I got to work on several episodes before I met him. So I got to like get used to the crew and the director, and I met the other actors I was working with. So I felt so comfortable already, as opposed to like just showing up on day one,
right,
and working with him.
Yes,
and
hello, I can act. Don't worry.
Yeah, trust me. But I'd been there enough.
This is great.
That I felt comfortable,
right, in facing him.
So yeah, so when he came in, that he did two of the most gracious things that I was like, this guy is an actor. He's not a celebrity. He is not a
yeah,
he's not out there like doing
caught up in his stardom, whatever.
No, it's all about the craft. And because he came in, he was on set with his wife. His wife came over and actually was sitting next to me first and was like talking to me about like being in the area and everything. So we were just kind of talking. He came over, and we started talking. He introduced himself, and then he immediately said, "Hey, we just finished this other thing, so I got to get my head wrapped around this scene. You want to run the lines?" And I was like, "Fuck yeah, I want to run the lines with you." I was like, you really like, do you know how nervous I am about screwing up? And it was like 3 pages. I had some speeches in there. I was like, yeah, I want to run the lines with you. So we just started running the lines.
Very cool.
The craft of it. And the story I shared earlier about the lunch, that was the scene with him.
Ah, cool.
And so then we get together and we sit down, and as we're sitting down and they're micing us and we're still kind of running lines and talking, the director, Jack Bender, he comes over and we're talking to him too. And Props comes in and puts like a salad plate in front of us, and starts doing stuff. And he just looks at it, and he looked at the director, and then he looked at me and our other scene partner, Max, and he was kind of like, hey, why would we have a meal together?
Right. We're not friends.
And it was kind of the first response from like Props and stuff is like, oh, well, we're not going to really see it. He's like, yeah, but that suggests that we've been sitting here for a while. Why would we be sitting here? We're not all on the same team, because him and his partner are trying to figure something out. And then I'm on the opposite side of the table, literally and figuratively.
Yeah. I saw this scene. Yeah. Cool.
And so that led to that whole conversation of sitting there and going, oh my God, like this is a thing. And like,
and you were good, man. You were there, focused, beautiful, totally delivering your thing. It was nice watching you. I was like, oh, is he nervous? I would be like, I would be like fanboy all over the place. Brendan Gleeson is my one.
So I do have a fun secondary story about that, the fanboy moment, because I had it. It was after we get there, and because it's a long scene, they're doing coverage on all of us. We did it a couple of times, and so like we're in it. It's getting good. I'm getting good feedback from director. The scene is moving. It's all working right. We've figured it all out. Now it's just the act of doing it 20 times or whatever. And there was a take where we're doing it, and we're just kind of in the mode of repeating the scene. And the director comes over, and they had flipped around, and one of the cameras was getting coverage of me, and he comes over. He's like, Adam, just, I feel like you're just leaning into sarcasm. So don't be sarcastic and don't smile. And I was like, I'm smiling? He's like, that take. He's like, you haven't been, but that take you were. And as soon as he said that, I started thinking, and when we're in the moment of the scene, and when one of the cameras wasn't on me, I legitimately, while I'm doing my lines, I had the thought, I am working with Brendan Gleeson. And his IMDb page starts running in my head, and I'm picturing
I'm part of his credits now.
And Troy, and I'm a big nerd, and I'm going, that's
right.
That IMDb from Harry Potter. And like,
I can understand.
So he gave me that note, and I was like, oh, I did.
Sorry,
I dropped
just
out
lost
of the scene.
It right there.
I fanboyed.
Right.
Yeah. But I didn't say it. I was just like, oh yeah, no, that's good. And I let Jack walk away, and then I was like, oh shit. Okay, focus up. All right, here we go.
Right. Don't screw this up, Brendan. You will eat you alive.
Fantastic. Fantastic.
Because, I mean, he's one of those, you make it or break it. You don't know from the outside, is he a really, really outstanding, cool guy, like an Irish guy, or is he a bit difficult to handle, whatever it's like. But
So
but
simple
then
and
he's so
sincere.
transparent in his play. He could have been anything else than what you're describing right now. I immediately knew this is a wonderful person. I mean, if you
Yeah.
act like he's acting, you're just so generous. Like in Bruges, he kind of blew me away. I don't know how many
Yeah.
times I saw his monologue with Ralph Fiennes sitting there. I just taught it also to my clients and to my students, like, when you have that perception of delivering your inner thoughts, your inner turmoils, your emotions, and being genuine with the situation, and being okay with whatever might happen to you, that sovereignty over that scene and that moment, you have to achieve that. That's mastery level. That's mastery level.
Yeah.
How many times did you went through your lines before, shooting with him? How do you combat nervosity, like generally when it's about time to go on set?
Well, I'm very specific in when it comes to learning my lines, in that I read the script, the full script, every word on repeat several times. Then I use an app and I have it play. And what it does is it'll leave my lines blank and it'll just say the other
Oh,
people's
that's
lines.
great.
But what I do is I memorize rote. And by that, what I mean is it's as much as possible, this is my line. I need to know these words. It's robotic, because I want to be very, very conscious that if I'm just focusing on memorization and knowing the lines, that I don't memorize a delivery. So I don't memorize an emotional reaction, and I'm not memorizing an inflection on a word. So I'm not always punching this word over and over, because I find that when actors do that, if they go, this is my line, this is my line, this is my line, you do that over and over, and then you give them a note like, hey, just bring it down. Oh yeah, no, absolutely, I'll bring it down. This is my line. Like, yeah, you didn't do it, bring it down. Oh, I got it. This is my line. Like, because it just gets
It's robotic.
it's so physically ingrained.
Yeah.
So as much as possible, I want to know the words 100%, but I want to be fluid and be able to turn it up and turn it down and listen and respond. I'm responding with the words that were given, but I can respond differently to to what I'm getting from my scene partners if that changes too. So that, as much as possible, I get to that point where I can run that app, and it actually has where you can increase the speed. And I want it to actually go really fast and me just be able to like blaze out the words without even thinking.
Please
So
share our app's name. Who does it? If it helps, it's great.
It's literally just called Line Learner.
Line Learner.
Let me double check it. And I think there's like a free version with ads, or you pay like $1. But it's an awesome app.
Yeah,
especially because
helpful.
I'm in the car a lot of times. Yeah, it's just Line Learner. All one word, all lowercase.
Cool.
If I'm, driving, the United States is such a driving centric place. So if I'm on road trips and stuff, if I'm driving to an audition, I'm, normally driving at least an hour or more to the location. So I can have my phone going and just be running the lines the whole way there. So I'm not having to worry about like, okay, I'm going to run my lines, and then I got to drive and do the thing and then get there and then read the script again or something. And so as much for my own kinetic way that I learn stuff, because I'm up and I'm moving and I'm doing stuff. I can't just sit in a chair with the paper, because I'll memorize the image of the paper and I want to know the words. I don't want to know that I've highlighted and like, so as much as I can get away from the page when working my lines, the more comfortable I feel in just being able to go off the cuff and not feel like I'm holding on to this thing, this safety net.
Right. Because I'm otherwise investing energy in this and not in this, not in the performance.
Yeah. Giving myself that little bit of an out where I can go, and grab the line.
Right. So you're teaching improv as well. And improv is again, it's a craft in itself. I mean, improv theater, stand-up comedy, stand-up theater, improv sport, theater sport. There's so many ways of poetry slams. There's so many ways of creating top of your head, or just have a few directions and then kind of simulating real life in the most compelling and interesting way. And I'm heavily interested because improv is one of those keys, I
Mhm.
think, to find whatever truth you might hide inside of yourself to kind of propel your performance. One of those very fundamental keys to have that courage to explore and where it takes you. Do you have a certain standard way of getting into the improv for your character that you have to study? Are there certain things that you establish beforehand, or you just go with the words, you just go with the description, go with the words and see what the situation holds for you in that moment?
I kind of just have to go with it. One of my favorite teachers at Second City, Michael Gelman, he used to
Hmm.
always say this idea of just attack the stage
Hmm.
and going out there and you just fucking do it.
Hmm.
And he'll also do this thing. He would just kind of shake his fist and stuff. And like, if people in class weren't really listening to someone, if you're so invested in your
Right,
idea
right.
of what's funny or what's whatever, if you're
Yeah.
kind of writing the scene in improv, then you're not paying any attention.
Hmm.
And so someone might say something, they may drop a lovely present or a truth bomb. They may say something that should impact you and
Right,
inform you and
right.
give you, and then the other person would say something that would negate that or go over it. And no, no,
Hmm.
no, no, no. And he would stop and you go, you can't do that. She just said she's not happy with you. And you went on and talked about this.
Hmm.
That you have to fucking deal with what
Hmm.
she just said. You can't
Unless,
ignore it.
yes,
And
absolutely.
like,
Unless it's your way of playing that it's not bothering you, that you don't want to talk about it because you don't feel comfortable, you have
but
to
that's not
react. But
interesting.
that's not interesting.
That even then there still has to be that level of like, we have to know that you heard her and you're purposefully ignoring her.
Right,
You can't just
right.
go no and go over it. We still have to know that you're uncomfortable by it, or you are angered by it, or sad by whatever. There still has to be a reaction to it, even if you're choosing not to
I totally
verbally
agree.
respond to it.
I totally agree. I
You know?
think one of the things people underestimate inside of a scene, and that is heavily interesting also and useful for improv, is competition. Competition inside of the scene, competition between those
Yeah.
characters,
I
not
want
just
to.
playing your boo. No, I don't want to. No, that's outside of my comfort. No, I don't have any competition with that character.
Yeah.
That character. You are in the same room with human beings. Even if you don't talk, you are in competition. If you are
Yeah.
waiting for the doctor, you're in competition with everybody who is waiting with you, who will be the first to be picked, who is looking more beautiful, who is
Yeah.
looking like deranged,
Who
right?
looks more contagious?
Right, who looks more contagious, who wears double masks. We always
Yeah.
competing with each other, and competition is one of those great engines for improv.
I think that improv, the thing that I find most interesting and what I think related into my acting a lot is that the level of trusting the process.
Hmm.
You have to trust the process to develop as an artist. And so in improv, your first few classes, your first levels, you're learning all these rules of improv
Right.
and you're learning this technique per
Hmm.
se. And as you get comfortable doing it within those confines, then you learn ways of how to do it, expanding it. So, your three main things within improv are that you make statements in the present,
Hmm.
as opposed to just asking a bunch of questions and putting
Hmm.
all of the like work on your partner.
Affirmations, right?
Yeah, affirmation. So you yes and what's going on, you agree with what's happening, and then you add to it,
Hmm.
and without negating them,
Hmm.
and that you are staying in this moment as opposed to like talking about a future event like, hey, I can't wait for you and me to go to the mall later. That's not interesting because we're here right now. Who cares about the imaginary mall later?
Hmm.
What's going on right here right now?
Hmm.
And so early on you're taught, in order to learn the idea of the yes and, you're taught like what happens when you negate and when you say no. And you get kind of in your brain about this idea of like, oh, I can't say no to anything. But then as you get more confident in it and more prepared in it, you start going, okay, there are ways where I can say no that do not negate the scene. So if you came in and said, hey, I want to go fishing, it's one thing for me to say, no, let's go on a bike ride. It's another thing for me to say, come on, man, you know that I don't enjoy fishing. Why do you want to make me do that?
Hmm.
That's a way of saying no to you, but I'm not negating the scene and I'm not negating what's happening.
Because you're opening up to the conversation.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
opening up.
sharing my point of view, and
Mhm,
that's a different thing. But so you start with these training wheels, and
mhm.
then as you get better, you remove some of those training wheels and you figure out like how to just kind of listen, respond, and be in that moment and not worry so much about writing the scene and being ahead of the scene and just look for the game of the scene itself. And I think that it relates a lot to even if you're doing dramatic work and you have a script. Yeah, I know maybe the words that are going to be said, but I'm still, what's the relationship? Where am I? What's the scene? What's going on? What is there a game within this scene that we're playing with each other by like the nuances and the things that maybe I'm holding back because I know that you want them, and I know that it'll make you angry if I hold it back a little bit. And like that to me that's the play of it. That's the fun of it, is looking for those little things.
Beautiful. And video is such an impactful tool, and it has become such a, you know, a to-go instrument to to advertise, to market your business, to talk about your story, to kind of, you know, raise money for charity. So acting has become a skill. It has become something that is not only for, you know, for entertainment purposes. It has become something that you need nowadays, because video has become like a fundamental tool, like one of those to-go tools that we all have to use. So I think people can get a lot of this, even though, you know, they are not necessarily you know, on the quest to, you know, become a great actor. They can still, for their own purposes, whatever they have in mind for their own business, for their own lives, learning how to really react to people, really listen to them, and start something in that moment that you know, is concerning that very moment. These two existences, they are battling, they're fighting, they're arguing over something. How can they get to a solution? How can they relate to each other? How can they be generous but still informing the counterpart what is going on with themselves? And I think improv is one of those beautiful instruments we kind of also tend to overlook. Maybe we don't have the time, we don't always have the muse, but, you know, I can only strongly encourage you, everybody who's listening to this, and creative community, performers, actors, creators, everybody out there, you know, go crazy with your material. If you are in your four walls, everything is safe, just go crazy. Do an improv with yourself, see where it can take you. Invite someone over, let him watch what you're about to say. Let him, you know, show him something to such a degree where he has to respond. Try to pull somebody in who is not even involved with the script or with the scene. You know, if it's a part of your family, if it's a friend who's just stopping by, and see how he reacts, and see how life can change on so many different layers and so many different ways, how you can impact those people. And I think tremendously, like gaining that momentum where you can, like you said, where you feel comfortable about your tools and say, okay, now let's see how I can say no. Now let's see how I can say yes without immediately jumping on his boat, or immediately just retrieving into my safety compound. You know, stay proactive with my game and with my performance. I think that's the real beauty of improv.
Absolutely. And it's a great, you know, for those people that don't want to be performers, it's a great confidence booster, and it's a great anxiety releaser. Because there's something, especially if you deal with a lot of anxiety, there's this idea of wanting to be in control of what's going on around you, of the people's responses to you. And there's something about going into a room for, you know, a couple hours each week with a bunch of strangers and going, okay, this empty room is now a bar, and you three are going to have a conversation. You're going to be the bartender, and you two are going to be on a first date. Let's see what happens. And going, okay, I don't know, I have no idea what's going to happen, and so let's do this. And then it may be funny, it may not be funny, it may work, it may not work, but at the end of the day, no one died. nothing was broken, nothing is ruined, nothing is there were no stakes.
That's beautiful. I mean, it's just wonderful.
And you can walk
let
away
it
and
all go
oh.
in there, and then everything, you know, it's no one's gonna get hurt. Something amazing happened when I was studying at the academy. We were always having these marathon improv classes, we called them. And we kind of, you know, dove into a situation for 1 hour straight, and our teachers were just observing us, how we kind of dealt with the situation, what we did, and what kind of solutions we came up with, and what we kind of proposed to the whole scenery. And we kind of went on to recording CDs and letting them play in our, you know, audio system, just to kind of simulate a radio speaker is talking about a situation that's going on outside. Maybe it's a war, maybe it's a pandemic, and you were kind of, you know, reacting to, no, we can't go out now, we have to stay in the room. And one day I was late to class, and they were all sitting there listening to this radio speaker, and he was talking about 9/11. And I thought that was a simulation, that was a class, because I didn't, watch the news. I just got up, espresso, kind of dressed up, and I went into class. So I wasn't, following anything in that day. And it was, I came in, it's like, well, guys, what the hell are you doing? Well, this is a great, okay, so I have to adapt. Now I'm playing with you. It's like, Lorenzo, you don't understand. This is reality. And now, because you were also part of the purge. Now we kind of have a situation outside where you think, looking at the riots, that this upheaval that is going on, and this craziness, like where all the laws right there, this is suddenly it's, for a couple of hours, people take that liberty to go all crazy and to devastate their environment, to just because they let out their anger, their frustrations. And partially I can understand where this anger comes from. And of course it kind of, accumulates a lot of steam. But in the end, what we see right now is just, again, it's the flip side. It's a devastation when what you said is beautiful, because in an improv, nobody gets hurt.
Yeah.
Nothing gets broken. Everything is okay. Afterwards, we can shake hands, open the windows, and everything is all right. The stuff that is happening right now, it will last. It will, it will leave an impression. The devastation will be there and tangible to see for weeks to come. We're sensitive people as creators and artists. How do you deal with stuff that is going on? Because, quarantine has been, we talked about, but then we kind of adapt now this, and we're always living in a current state of crisis and problems and upheavals, and everywhere you hear bad news. And as being the sensitive person, at the same time, to get that in, and sure, it happens, perceive it, it's reality, but then you have to stay on track. You have to live your life. You have to put out and make sure that your family is provided and taken care of. How do you kind of exclude that, and how do you deal with that?
So just to make sure I fully understand, so to be aware and absorb what's happening, but to also not let it overtake us as
overtake
artists.
us, absolutely. I
think a lot of that comes from, you have to have a grounding in your life that is outside of your performance. I do go to therapy, and I think that everyone should. I think everyone can benefit from several sessions a year of just concentrated work on understanding yourself and your processes. I definitely came from a background and a belief or purview that if you went to a psychologist or a psychiatrist or went to therapy, that something was wrong with you, you'd been traumatized, you were a soldier with PTSD. Like, I always believed it had to be something extreme. And I had some anxiety issues and some anger issues and stuff that I was like, yeah, they're fine. Like, they're not ruining, like, I will survive. I'm not ruining relationships. I'm not doing a whole lot of things like that. And it took a few friends, and my wife actually has a degree in international psychology. And it took us talking before I was like, you know what, it's worth it. Let me go explore this. So I think everyone has to, if you're going to be an artist, you're going to be creative, and you're going to absorb all the negative and all of the good in order to create, in order to develop, in order to emulate or sympathize or empathize, any of those things. If you're allowing all of that into your life, you have to find a grounding to release it, and to also not be responsible for it. Because it's one thing if I, I've played roles where I'm a racist. I'm not in life, but I've played roles where, like, I was a KKK member because I have a beard and I'm a white guy, so it's easy to cast me as that. And I did my homework, and I did what I needed to do to be that role. But I had to keep very conscious separation of, it is a role, and when it's done, it's done. And I was very clear when I was wrapped. I went and talked to the people that I was saying terrible things to when, the camera was rolling, and being like, look, this is a great way to tell the story. But I feel the necessity to 100% assure you that I am not this guy, just for my own purposes. It's not that I believe that you believe that I am this guy. I was like, but that's
I'm
a way
so
of me
good as an actor
releasing.
that you will believe me. So
there's people, we see the bad stories. We see the actors that go too far and don't let go.
But if you haven't, that's very thoughtful and beautiful. And I think it's also necessary, because, people are, but please go ahead.
Well, it was just a little side note that if you're reading books and stuff, if you haven't read Bryan Cranston's book,
No, I haven't so far.
He has a fantastic book, and it goes back and forth between a little bit of craft and a little bit of just a memoir of himself. But he
Hmm.
talks very specifically about his process in Breaking Bad,
Hmm.
and that on the worst days when he was doing the worst things to people,
Hmm.
him and his assistant, he had a method. He would go back to his trailer. There was a steaming bowl of water there and a towel,
Hmm.
and it was 30 minutes. No one knocks, no phone calls, no nothing.
Right.
And he would sit there and he would take this hot towel and drape it over his head. And I believe, I'm going to paraphrase this, but I believe he was imagining the idea that as the water dripped from him, it was taking away Walter White, and
Hmm.
that he was leaving the character on set.
Hmm.
Because I think early on he was having some issues of like
Hmm.
doing angry stuff all day
Hmm.
long and then coming home and being angry with his family, and like, no,
Hmm.
no, no, I gotta
Hmm.
create that separation. And I think that we always have to explore those things of going like, okay, this is what this is the story I'm telling, and I am the method of telling that story, but it is not my story.
Hmm.
I am not the person responsible for it.
That's
And that's a
it's
balance.
exactly what I said. A couple of people that said, right now it really concerns me what's going on in LA and stuff like. That's their story. You're not responsible for those people, robbing and plundering and just being crazy all over the place and releasing their anger in this way. It's you're not responsible for that. So of course, perceive it. It's true. It's reality. But don't absorb it too much. Don't get hurt by actions that you're not responsible for in any ways. Yeah, but we're part of the system. Yeah, and in a way, we're all responsible for all the bad things that happen because we're all feeding, in a way, the system, if we like it or not. We're not detached, off grid, living somewhere in Norway in our camping van with solar power fuel, and that's not what we're doing. What we're doing is inspiring people, and art is always diving into dark corners of our personality, of society, of our environment, and we have to deal with that because that's where I think the greatest performances come from. Like we're saying
But
mm,
I agree. I will say though that as artists, and this idea of being that we're going to present stories with, to me, both for entertainment,
mhm,
but also to hopefully create some change.
mhm,
Even if you're doing a comedy, you're hoping for change because you're hoping to make people laugh and feel better.
sure,
That's the feedback that you want. I think what a little bit of at least the American problem
mhm,
is that if it's anything over there, then it doesn't affect me.
yeah,
And the problem that we're having right now is because too many people that look like me have said, well, I'm not
yeah.
causing it and I'm not part of that system. And it's over there. So I'm just going to let it go. And that's where we have failed. And
I,
that's
know-
what leads to these things, is when we're so far removed
I
that
get
we
what you're
go, I'm
saying,
not part of the problem,
right?
but I'm also not helping to be part of the solution.
But isn't every country like stigmatizing itself or denigrating itself for something they did bad or continuously doing bad? Every country, every nation, every race has its own flaws, its own inconsistencies. And I'm saying this because as actors we embrace
Mhm.
flaws. No, as
Yeah.
actors we embrace diversity, we embrace problems and conflicts and being totally different, and also mindsets that are completely different from ours. And what I discovered through acting is that everybody has the right also to have its mindset. What I think sometimes we're going too far in, it's true, we're educating to a certain extent, but we can't educate everybody. There's always, we need those little spots of craziness, of chaotic, of disorder, of funkiness, to a certain
Yeah.
extent, also of evilness. Because if we wipe out everything and we just have that clean white sheet, we going back to THX 1138, that
Yeah, then we're getting into
control.
dystopia. There's because that suggests that everyone is in 100% agreement, and yeah, no, that's a statistical and psychological impossibility
Absolutely. That's why
without
I was picking up on
medical
the
control.
purge. Yes, it's medical control. And we have to be very careful, right? To not
Yeah.
sacrifice that beautiful freedom of ours and having that individuality, also the right
Yeah.
to be different. That's why I was picking up on the purge, because I think it's a wonderful setup. How did you get to that role? How did it happen? Because it's such a
Um,
great and interesting show.
The Purge is one of those ones that, you know, it helps with the size of the industry in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it helps to live in smaller pockets. So myself, and I know that you talked to Dean West. So by living in like the Southeast and living in New Orleans, and the amount of work in New Orleans and Atlanta and Nashville and some of those areas, there's a smaller pool of people going out for it. And there's also tax incentives and reasons that it's more affordable for a production to hire local actors. So I think it was just a combination of a little bit of right place, right time, because I know that they were looking at LA actors because it was it wasn't a huge role, but it was several episodes. So they're like, well, if we get someone, you know, fun or that's on the rise, you know, that is what it is. It'll help to promote the show. But I think that because it's a TV show that was based on a very successful film franchise, they were so much more willing to go with unknown people. Beautiful. And they had their couple of stars, but then past that, they just wanted to tell the story. And so I was one of however many 100 people that got to audition and went through the process, and it just happened to be me. And it was, we're always chasing that idea.
It just happened to be me. It was like I was picked by accident. No,
I mean, that's that. Now you're hearing a little bit of the imposter syndrome come out of me, and that little bit of that, like I get very self-deprecating about my success. Even that, like, there was no reason for me to do that because it's very hard to be an open, empathetic, sympathetic actor, and like I'm not ego driven, and like I don't want to be like, yeah, it was me. I don't know who else they saw, but it was me. Like, I'm not that guy. So I tend to be the guy that like brushes away.
But like, that doesn't have anything to do with ego. I think just to, you rightly said, you have to acknowledge who you are.
Yeah.
Truthfully when you're acting. Why shouldn't you do so in your private life as well? That, both are affecting each other. So when you're
making progress in that.
Yeah. You don't have to go to your therapy. Let's just talk once a week.
No, but it is a thing that, well, so here's the thing that I coach students on. And it's the thing that I tell them in order to reinforce it in myself. And you know this as a coach. Teaching is a way of reinforcing in ourselves what we want.
Absolutely.
And this is something that I did start doing before the Purge, and it's something that I have been very conscious about is telling people that I'm an actor. Because it is a thing that so many people get a little bit embarrassed by, especially early on, especially before you have credits, when you're training. If you asked, if I asked one of your random students, like met them in an elevator and said, oh, what do you do? They would probably tell me where they work. They probably wouldn't tell me that they were trying to be an actor. They'd be like, oh, well, I work at a bookstore and, whatever. Right. But like, even when I have side jobs or other things that I'm doing, if someone asks, what do you do? I'm an actor. And then it goes from there. If I start off by saying like, oh, I work at a coffee shop and I want to be an actor, well, then I'm always putting it second. So I am an actor. I have not fully absorbed the confidence of when I have booked that it's because I booked. And that's a process that I'm going on. But the greatest moment for me in the last couple of years where I felt like this is working, and it gave me the confidence that I should be able to accept more readily, like I am doing this. The last day that I worked on Mr. Mercedes, well, no, that's not true. So because there was a whole conversation after I booked about my beard and stuff. The way Mr. Mercedes worked, I booked 2 episodes back to back. And then they were talking about whether or not I would return later in the season. Cool. So I was like, okay, I booked 2 episodes. That's great. It's a recurring co-star. I'm happy. When I wrapped on that second episode, and at that point I still believed it's done, I'm done.
Right.
That was the role I booked, and I may or may not come back, but they always say that kind of stuff. I'm not holding my breath until it's a contract. I wrapped. I went back to the hotel. It's like midnight. And then I got a text from my agent or my manager that was just like celebratory emojis. And so here I am having that initial depression of I've just stopped working. I just finished. And like you leave from set and you just get that wave of like, I got to do the thing that I fight so hard to get to do. I can't wait to do it again, but I don't know when that'll happen. I get back to the hotel room and I got these texts and I was like, what's going on? She's like, the paperwork's going through tomorrow. You booked the role in the Purge. The Purge I knew was going to be 3, maybe 4 episodes. So I was like, oh my God, I'm done. And I know when my next job is.
That's
And
so
I
beautiful.
legitimately cried. I was like, this is what an actor wants. They want to
Yes.
work and they want to know they're going to work again. And then like, as I'm preparing for The Purge, then I find out I'm doing the other 2 episodes of Mercedes. And I was like, oh, okay, this is working. This is generating. This is the momentum's there. And I went to those sets confident because I'm like, I'm doing it. I'm working. I got the stuff. I can do this. I'm on set with people that know what they're doing. Like, this is the momentum. And this is where I feel, successful in it.
Would you also recommend to the people in the Southeast not moving to New York necessarily, or Chicago to LA, and staying in the Southeast because Atlanta is opening up, New Orleans, there are some jobs, Nashville is always grinding its content.
Yeah.
Of course, it's not as big as in those 3 hubs, but it's, like, because one of the topics of today is success, how it looks, what it means, what it really means to you. And people have that kind of distorted way at perceiving success, just being on the billboard, just driving that Lamborghini. And I look at you and I see a coach, I see somebody who acts with an enormous amount of craftsmanship and dignity. I see somebody who's funny, I see somebody who's inspired, who's reading. So you're pretty successful. Right, that is success. That is a representation of success. You have freedom of your choices. You can use your weapons. You have your own instruments, and you have time to refurbish and put in the work, and people listening to you. So, I mean, that is success.
Yeah. Well, to the first part of that question about whether or not you should stay like in the Southeast or go somewhere else, I think it's a little complicated because it depends on your skill level. There are definitely coaches and places to train and everything in the Southeast, and there is a way that if you are going from nothing to getting started, you can down there. But if you want to do really, really intense training, if you really want to like, okay, I don't care about auditioning, I don't care about agents, if you don't care about financial return,
right,
immediate,
immediate,
it may be worth
Mm-hmm.
looking into, okay, where can I go and I can just focus on craft. And that's still a little bit of the New York, Chicago, LA.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple of studios that do conservatory stuff, maybe in Atlanta. But if you're not trying to like audition and book, if you just want to be a confident actor and do an acting intensive like that, or
Yeah.
schooling, I don't think that there's anything like that established in our area. But if you're looking to get in the industry, if you're like, I'm going to train, but I'm also going to pursue working, then yeah, I think that just by sheer volume, your odds are better. And I think that
It's a smaller
if you
pond.
start to
Without,
succeed,
it's
absolutely. And if the mistake a lot of people make, it's not about where they are at the beginning of it, it's once they start to book. And I saw this when I was in Chicago. I've seen it in New Orleans. It happens all the time that like, I 100% believe it would have been a mistake for me to book Mr. Mercedes and then go, I got 4 episodes on a TV show, I'm moving to LA. No one in LA cares about that show. No one in
4
LA cares
episodes.
about that credit. Yeah, they're like, so what? Yeah, like there's so many
Makes
things
sense.
out there
Right.
that unless you had a specific role that got
Right.
amounts of attention, and like if I booked a role in the Southeast that got an Emmy nomination or something, then like, okay, that's different. But if it's just you're booking roles and working until you have outgrown the area, I don't think you should leave. And there's an actress that I know that she got to that point where, and we had this conversation of like, she had booked an episode of pretty much every TV show in the Southeast. But she was still kind of debating like, well, should I go to LA or not? Or like, there is literally no work for you here. You're waiting on movies at this point to come here.
Right.
And like and she books movies every now and then too, but I was like, but you're waiting for all the small roles on movies at this point because you cannot work on these TV shows again. So now you have tapped out the area. It's time to go. If you booked one thing, then like, no, you're not ready. If you just like booked once, that doesn't mean you're competitive. That doesn't mean you're ready to go to LA. It just means you booked that thing.
Right.
So that's all. I've always, and with my travels and where I've been, like, I don't have a draw to live in LA. So if the industry doesn't want me there yet, I'm not going there. I'm happier. I'm more centered being in the South.
Yeah. You should feel your environment and where you at. Being sensitive and being creative people, you drain a lot, you get a lot from where you are right now. If you don't feel comfortable where you are right now, it's hard to create always under pressure in an uncomfortable situations. It's good for a while, but then again, you know, it's where is the long-term solution to this? Because you know, making it in the entertainment industry, it's a marathon. It's surely not a sprint. So you have to know exactly, okay, do I have enough critical mass for that marathon right now? No, so I maybe get some kilometers into my legs. I bet I get some more training, and then once I feel like I have that stamina, that endurance, and also that necessary attention, you know, that I get, finally, okay, now it makes sense, like you're saying, to maybe try out a bigger hub, or like Dean West did, you know, jumping into Los Angeles, creating
a little bit of both,
and then a little bit of both, coming back and always traveling all over the place. I'm curious, like, I mean, I don't want to hold up too much of your time because
I'm good. I'm enjoying this.
Thank you.
The greatest moment is I love that we have disagreed a little bit on stuff.
Yes.
it would be a boring conversation.
Totally boring conversation.
Me talking and you going, okay, good. Now the next question.
But I knew that, and that's why I wanted to do this talk so badly. I knew we would disagree on certain points, but in the end, we're searching, you know, for
the journey is the same. We're just taking different paths.
That's so beautiful. It's like martial arts, and so many things that, you know, require repetition and repetition and repetition.
Yeah.
When did you get to when did you get to the point where you said, okay, maybe that came from that being a pastor or being in that community service and preaching to the people, sharing something, you know, seeing the reaction in the eyes. It's not only acting, it's also getting that feedback you talked about. I think that's what's so precious about the coaching experience, because as an actor, you just deliver something, it's beautiful, you feel accomplished, super, but then you wait for the next job. As a coach, I feel you leave sometimes way more of a legacy. Did that come from your spiritual voyage in the beginning, or where did it pop up, that wish to kind of teach and share?
I think a little bit of both.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, my family is my mom, my sister, my grandparents. They all were educators. They're all teachers or were teachers, and we're a very education-centric family. We read a ton of books. We read, we talk, we discuss. Like that's something that I've always been passionate about. So I think there's that aspect to it, which I think was probably first, which maybe led towards the pastoral aspect and wanting to lead Bible studies and things like that, and be the person that was involved in that. Of like, if I have this, you know, belief that comes both from a scripture and from, I think it's a poem out there, that this idea that, you know, all ships rise with the tide, right? So if there's anything that we can do to raise the tide, all ships rise with it. So I don't view acting as competition. Even if you and I are auditioning for the exact same thing and we're saying the exact same words, we have different essences. And at the end of the day, if we both are amazing at our craft and crush the audition, it comes down to which person do they feel like fits it more. And that's, you know, it's not about, oh, you beat me, or I beat you, or you won and I lost. It's not that. It's not a rejection industry. And I hate that idea that we all have brought into, like, oh, you got to have a thick skin because it's a rejection-based industry. It's not rejection. They select someone, but that doesn't mean that they hate everyone else. That doesn't mean they're rejecting everyone else. It doesn't mean you got to know. It just means that guy got a yes. And that's one thing that I always have felt passionate about, is like, get rid of the idea that you're being rejected. And then, you know, so the education part, I think, led into me wanting to, you know, be involved in ministry, and this idea that we should lift everyone up with our own knowledge. And then also this idea that iron sharpens iron. And the way that it does that, iron sharpens iron in the way that one person sharpens another. You and I having this conversation, we're both learning from each other, and we're just literally like, boom, sparks fly, boom, sparks fly, boom, sparks fly. And we'll both leave sharper, right? And that comes, there's a degree to that. That comes from two people being at the same level that they're both iron or steel or adamantium or whatever. You know, if I'm steel, I don't want to try and sharpen wood.
Right.
Like, I'll just end up splitting it.
Right.
And so when it comes to coaching, I have a little bit of an approach of like getting people at the same level to beat off of each other and to feed off of each other. And I'm just trying to redirect the way in which you guys learn off of each other, because it shouldn't just be me telling you how to do it, because
it's not the right way.
that's not the best way, especially for
No,
artists.
no,
And there was
absolutely.
there's this concept. It's
It's
a
a short-term
classical.
solution to a long-term problem.
Yes, yeah. I could teach you how to say something the way I would say it, but I'm not. It's harder for me to teach you my approach to it. But
Mhm.
there is this idea that came from like classical art approaches, like back during the times of like Van Gogh and stuff. I think it's called a bodega, but it's essentially it's a mentorship,
Mhm.
and it's a 5-stage thing where if you're the master and I'm the student, you do your work and I watch. Then you do your work and I help. Then
Mhm.
we do the work together. Then I do the work and you watch. Or then I do the work and you help. And then I do the work and you watch.
Mhm.
And that to me creates long lasting developed artists,
That's
is
cool. Yeah.
if you can walk someone through the process of them becoming a master artist
Yeah.
themselves, as opposed to being the head of an army of people that repeat what
Right.
you said in class.
Well, you know, two approaches to life: love or fear. Do you have a vertical approach, or do you have a circular, a spherical approach? Do you want to embrace things and put them into a context where you holistically everybody has its own contribution and the right part in this, or do you
Yeah,
want to command from an upper stage just, you know, to satisfy your ego? And I think what you're, you know, you want to include people. That's
yeah,
why you're not talking about winners or losers, or you know, you've been selected or not, evaluated. All these thoughts are coming also from the indoctrination of the classical teaching and educational systems. You know, yeah, you failed, you know,
yeah,
he won, you
yeah,
lost, right? We
yeah,
need a black, we need a white, you know, we need winners, we need losers. No, we need, like you said, we need iron on iron, adamantium on adamantium, vibranium on vibranium. We need the healthy competition.
yeah,
That's why I'm also so passionate about reaching out to other people and getting their knowledge into my system and sharing with the community. I read Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People, I don't know how
mm,
many times, and he wrote that book in the 30s. It
yeah.
seems like an
And it's still
eternity ago, and
relevant.
it's still, you know, it couldn't be more contemporary.
Yeah,
It couldn't be more contemporary. How do you get out of a crisis? By sharing your values and making it stronger as a chain. Because
yeah.
you know, alone you can only go so far. But if we all pull this together, and coaching, though, it's beautiful the metaphor that you use, but there must have been some, like, a point where you said, you know what, because to me it was like experiencing what was, I found it really frustrating that there was nobody out there like in my age and
Mm,
describing things in a younger and more compelling and crispy way. I found it also, you know, that people wouldn't, you know, would charge so much by delivering so little information and really give value to the performance. So I thought, you know, you can do that better. You want to
yeah,
help those kids, because if I help them, you know, entering the industry, they will enrich in the industry. I will feed off of them, you know, on the
yeah.
long term, from their contribution to the industry eventually at some point. So when did it really start to you to make click and say, you know, I want to add coaching, because it's a totally different
It
life than
it
the acting life.
actually it's a little bit of a Robin Hood vendetta that I have. So here's how it actually came about. Of like, so I'd been in Chicago and I was working for a little while. And again, my background is in education. Like I have a secondary education degree, so I
Mhm,
know how to structure classes. I know
mhm.
how to create,
Topics, talk
a
about
system
that.
of going back and
Sure.
forth with students and grading and looking at things. And I saw an advertisement for, I'd had some training at that point, and there was a school that was looking for acting coaches.
Mhm,
And I was like, oh, I can create lesson plans. It was like, I know enough now that it was, targeted towards kids. So I was like, yeah, I can teach
mhm,
kids how to do this. I don't
mhm,
know if I can teach my contemporaries, but I can
mhm.
definitely teach new kids. And I went and I started working there, and I worked there for about 3 months before I realized that it was a scam school, and
I
that they were pilfering off of the dreams of people that had little to no money and charging them astronomical. And it was a shady ass place.
I mm,
And but I had also like committed to a contract, and I needed the income. at the time.
Mm-hmm.
So I tried working with them and figuring out like, hey, let's
Mm-hmm.
adapt this of
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm not going to
Make it
talk
a
to you
bit
about your
better.
billing, but
Right.
let's see if we can make it a
Yeah.
valuable
Right.
thing. And once they realized that I wasn't teaching from their handbook, then I started getting reprimanded. So another 3 months after I was like, this might be a bad idea. It was another 3 months. And then I was like, all right, I'm out. So for about 6 months, I was working at this scam school.
Mm-hmm.
And then it wasn't too much longer after that we ended up moving back down to the Southeast. And I went for a little while just kind of working and stuff, but I started booking and was working more as an actor. So I felt more confident, like, okay, I do know what I'm doing. And so I do know that I have value to other people that want to pursue this. And I found another school and started teaching there. And it just became a thing where like I was teaching at schools and programs that were sort of half actors and half like people that were maybe interested in acting or just needed a hobby.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of developed from there where I finally reached a point where I was like, okay, I'm going to do this my way kind of solely, because my ultimate goal, again, like we talked about, what do I say I am? If I meet someone, I am an actor. I'm not an acting coach.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an actor.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to coach people, but
Mm-hmm.
my goal is to be a working actor. I don't ever want to be that guy that teaches and occasionally acts, because if I want that bodega mentality, if I want to be able to do the master and student until we cross paths and you're the master, then I still need to be working as an actor. I still need to be on set. I still need to be auditioning. I still need to be in it and good at my craft. And I actually had a point where I was teaching so much and I was taping and coaching students so much that my auditions sucked.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the time to invest. And so again, I was teaching at the school for like 2, 3, 4 years. And I reached a point where I finally stepped back and it was like, as an actor, I haven't worked in 8, 9 months, almost a year. And I know that my auditions are crap. And I quit teaching. I was like, this is not the goal. This is not the goal. So I quit teaching and I got involved in the industry and got back in classes myself and was like, nope, I need to get back to where I am good. And I went and I did a summer intensive and this fantastic teacher in New York, Barbara Marchant at William Esper's studio. I had this conversation with her of like, I was teaching and I love teaching and I want to teach, but I started to suck as an actor when I was teaching. And she was asking me about my students and, the level that they were at and stuff. It was like, well, some are working, some are not, some are new, some don't care about it. It's just a hobby. And she's like, okay. She's like, here's the problem. You are absorbing their bad habits. If you spend all day saying, here's the things you shouldn't do, and then correcting actors that are doing the things you don't want them to do. And as she's saying that, I could think of all the times that I went into an audition and did the things that I tell them not to do.
Sometimes you suck them out of their system and you absorb them and
it just like gets into your subconscious and you start going, oh yeah, no, you're right.
Maybe we should try out that water towel method of Brian Cranston sometimes. Because,
teach then I'm just gonna
get the coach out of it, all these experiences. Now I'm just the actor again.
So I'm loving I'm loving doing this. I'm doing stuff now, especially in quarantine with this Zoom setup and stuff, where I'm being very specific with very specific individuals. So I'm working on what they need to work on in the moment, as opposed to if you're in a group setting and it's a group class, it's a little bit more like, I'm going to address as much as I can, and people that are above it, it might be a little less. People that are below it might be too much.
I know
so
what
I
you
like
mean.
the one-on-one.
Yeah, I love the one-on-one. I love it too. But sometimes those group classes, they have a very peculiar dynamic. Sometimes
they have a vibe.
They have a vibe, and sometimes I see myself in one of those dark horses kids not really allowing themselves to really step up, and then bada boom, it happens. They want to catch up to that group. They want to level up, and sometimes they come up with an enormous leap. It happens once in a while, and that kind of makes me rethink about the system. It has to be a mixed system, because I love those group sessions as well, because you can. Sometimes the dynamic is very interesting. If you set it right, if you have that educational degree to set the boundaries in the right way where they can really thrive for and have without you intervening too much, very interesting things can happen. And sometimes they kind of realize, you know what, I got that power. People eventually listen to me. Look at this right now. Oh, my speech does make sense, or I'm in tune with my body all of a sudden. And yeah, I miss those big classes, but I love those very intimate and private Zoom sessions as well, because they can get really to the core of things. So I guess both things are very vital. It's again,
It has to be a balance,
it has to be a
always,
balance.
because especially
Absolutely.
at the end of the day, acting is such a intimate thing that it can't just be you figuring it out and you and me working on it together to figure it out. Eventually, it has to be you across from an actor or actress, locking eyes, saying the words, and emotionally reacting to each other. And that, you know, you cannot replace the work that happens in a scene study. You
No,
can't.
no,
Zoom will never do that.
no. It's
One-on-one coaching will never do that. It has to be two people in a place feeling each other's
the
biorhythms, your
frequency,
breathing, your
the
heart rate,
electricity.
like all of
Yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah. It's Nikola Tesla.
Yes,
You have to
yes.
get that exchange, otherwise it doesn't happen. It doesn't stay in your system. You know what? A Bulgarian scientist, he did something quite amazing. He had this vacuum tube, and he put an orchid into that vacuum tube, and then he extracted that orchid and he shot photons in it, and they aligned accordingly to the orchid that used to be in there, because even the orchid leaves a trace of light in a
Mm,
vacuum tube. Even the orchid leaves a frequency, a resonance, because it's a living organism. So we leave that trace as well. And we need to see and perceive that, because that trace will change it will give us something new. It will give us a new alignment and so many possibilities in our brain. Don't restrict yourself, right?
yeah,
Just,
yeah,
just try to make as many connections as you can. That will make you smarter and will let you go further down the road. Um,
absolutely.
you described many things on how, we talking about how what success could mean, where you can get it, if you need to go to these big hubs, or you can have success in your fairly small beautiful niche and kind of fulfill the big fish in a small pond,
Yeah.
and then maybe dive into bigger oceans. You can start becoming an actor by starting as an extra, but also what, touching upon your short movie, Huevos Rancheros, you can
Mhm.
also, direct your first movie, shoot your movie, write your
Create your own
movie,
content.
and just go crazy on festivals and get
Yeah.
access from that door into the entertainment industry. Can you a little bit reflect on? I saw the movie twice. It's beautifully said. I will talk. We kind of let my thoughts about it. But first of all, I wanna know, how did you got to that peculiar topic, and how did you came up with the idea, and where did it start?
It's interesting because it relates to what's going on now. You're talking
Hmm.
about earlier with like the riots and stuff,
Hmm.
and and the protests, and uh my timeline is probably a little bit off, but when marriage equality passed in the United States,
Yes.
and there'd been years of marching, and there'd been all kinds of stuff, and the streets are flooded with people celebrating, and immediately we started seeing people getting married and all this stuff. And when the vote passed, I texted a handful of my really, really close friends in the LGBTQ community. And I sent them a simple text. It said something to the effect of, I'll never know what this means to you
Hmm.
because it was never denied to me,
Hmm.
and that was it. And it like,
Hmm.
and there was this weird sending of it that kind of broke in me in my own heart and for myself in a certain way of like seeing everyone's celebration and how much it meant. I kind of felt guilty that I hadn't done more to be involved in
Hmm.
helping them push that forward.
Hmm.
You know, I was passive. I wasn't in the way, but I wasn't helping.
Basically
And
what
that,
your character also stated in the movie.
well, yeah, so that's a line that Marcus, my friend Michael Scott,
Right.
who did the short film with me, and I went to, when I wrote the first draft, I went to him, and he's a guy that I love being around. He's very, very positive, and he's that kind of person that just uplifts everyone around you. And I showed it to him, and I was like, look, I want to tell this story, but this is not my community,
Hmm.
and it is his community. I was like, and I'm only going to do this if you will do it with me, because you need to protect that voice. You need to protect the thing that I can't write about.
Mm-hmm.
And it became this process for like a year, me, him, and the director, Brian Richard, of like just rewriting the script and going further and further and further and deeper and deeper and deeper until we felt like we'd crossed a line.
Mm-hmm.
And then we kind of brought it back.
Right.
So now we've reached the point where we're now like pushing the boundary too far, and kind of brought it back. And that's why Marcus says that, of like, you know, not being against me is not the same as being for me.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing that had hit me.
That smashed.
That happened.
Right.
And I was just like,
right.
you know, and that's a little bit of what unfortunately I'm feeling again during what's going on now.
Right.
You know,
mm-hmm.
But that's what led to that. And I had made like a couple goofy web series, and I had like kind of helped people produce stuff before, and I had tried to produce a pilot years before that was garbage, and like it was made for the wrong reasons. Because it was made those things were made because I was an actor who wasn't acting enough and wanted to make his own thing. So my result impeded on the desire. This one I'm still immensely proud of because there was a story to be told, there was a heart to it, and then it was just figuring out how to make it, as opposed to just make, you know, when you meet people that are like, I'm going to write a screenplay that's going to win an Oscar. No, you're not. Because that's your desire.
Right. Like, it's my desire that it's, you know, comes first and not the purpose of telling a great story. I'm telling you this, Adam, I think it's a little masterpiece. It's not a little bit, it's a masterpiece. Because we know exactly how hard it is to tell conversation, it's like Chekhov said in The Three Sisters. I said a lot of people, they are, you know, Chekhov, he was looking at his own plays in the theater room, and he went sitting in the audience and said they don't know how to interpret that feeling of being annoyed, of being bored of life. They are not interpreting it in the right way because they just, you know, they are just actors artificially putting on that show like, oh God, I'm so bored. But the reason they are bored, why they are annoyed, because inside of themselves, there is a turmoil, there's a war going on, raging, but they are not showing that. They're just playing the surface and playing a conversation, a real dispute in a very dignified way, in a very elegant, with good taste, delivering a conversation that has meaning with good taste in a flawless way, photographed in a great manner, where the focus is all about the connection of those two people and what these stories are meaning respectively to them. It's so hard, and you did an amazing job.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
No, absolutely. It's not circumstantial chit chat. It was real fun watching this film. And I thought, wow, this is great. Somebody who has that absolute trust in his scripture, you know, and is believing in the content that he's trying to portray, and the visual is just supporting that vision, that mission. It's not trying to. You could have done so many, you know, let's go back to the establisher, let's, you know, pick up some mood of the coffee place, let's run around. But no, those little things that are happening, they're all in the right place, they have all the right quality. And then let's lean back and let's, you know, get close to the actors. And that's what's really important. And really deal with the story, with the human condition, how two opposite forces are dealing with one topic that is conflicting to them in terms of how it manifests on both sides of the river. Such a great piece, man. Really.
And that's, you know, if you're an actor, artist, storyteller out there that wants to create, you got to surround yourself with people that are on board with that vision. And Natalie Kingston, our director of photography, she understood that the space that we were in is going to be such a big part of telling that story, that when you're having that conversation that is so right there and jagged, but to have a friggin' like sundae put down in front of you by the waitress and have this like moment of like, you know, this is
it's happening all at the right time, and it's all there. But it also it kind of reminded me of what was the Julia Roberts show I just watched recently, Homecoming. The first season, the second season, but the first season, it was kind of like this. It was this unsettling situation, but you couldn't tell why it's unsettling, because on the surface it all looked calm and totally normal, right? but in
But
there,
it's all just bubbling just underneath.
wonderful, man.
Yeah.
Really. Yeah. And also the other colleague, amazing job, man. It's beautiful to watch two people conversate right now. I mean, I'm always about that. Like, talk, really listen, and then speak, just listen and then speak. Don't come up with a prefabricated idea on how you want to respond. Just listen and just dive into that, because nowadays everybody's talking, everybody's loud, everybody's aggressive, everybody's dropping names all the times. But what is he really saying? What is the content of that message? And I kind of have my problems. I'm working for over 30 years with the media industry. I kind of have my problems sometimes on how they kind of reflect reality to the public out there, because it's so distorted. They could do a way better job by using words more carefully, images more carefully, and really redirect to the heart of what the message, the news should be all about, right? We talked
Instead,
about
it's reactionary and it's speed driven, because we're in a 24-hour news cycle, and because we have our phones, we got to get it out there.
Yeah, bam. And this piece you did is so calming, so soothing, but it never lacks interesting moments and tension. So I highly recommend you performing communities out there. I will, include all the links in the comment section below to really check out this
fantastic. Thank you.
On Adam's website. Absolutely, man. We touched upon so many things. It's been a blast. I think we really delivered some value to our communities, respective wise. So please let us know in the comment section below what you thought of this. We definitely have to do this again somehow, maybe work on something, maybe create a challenge.
So many more things that we can do. Yeah. So many more things.
It was such a blast meeting you, man. Really.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for finding me and reaching out to me. Like, this is the kind of stuff that I love, because it's so surprising and it's unexpected, and it immediately makes me go like, ooh, today is going to be different, Cool. And sometimes we just want the day to be a little different.
Just want to give me some more taste. Give me some taste.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, we're obsessed about this. So thank you so much, Adam Stephenson, creative community out there. That's it for today's episode of Talks on Acting. I hope we delivered value to you guys. I hope you could cherish a lot from our respective experiences, from our tools that we use to propel our performances. Make sure to look up Adam's fabulous content on those various platforms out there. Book him for a session. If you're in the Southeastern region, absolutely look him up and get one of his improv classes into your system, or one of his coaching classes. See you next time, creative community. Thank you so much. Share this content to your community, because ultimately our mission here at the Coach MC Studio is to create a thriving community of great actors for ever better performances through the remarkable performances. Smash the bell also to get notified every time we grind out the new video. Leave a comment in the comment section below. Leave us a thumbs up. See you next time, guys. Now you're ready to perform. Thank you.